Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Jurassic Time. I am Paolo, representing Jurassic Library and Jurassic Time, and today we're going to take a very special look at the Fallen Kingdom Stegosaurus. We had the amazing opportunity to interview Reed Cesare, one of the artists who worked at Studio ADI and helped produce the gargantuan stegosaur that we've all come to love and who's captivated our minds for years. Finally, we will get to know how it was made, why it was so big, and even learn a bit more about Reed, as he has had a fantastic life and one that's incredibly interesting in terms of the effects industry, and one that is truly inspiring if you're one who wants to get into this industry. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at the Fallen Kingdom Stegosaurus. So today I'm joined by Reed, who worked on Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So before we begin, tell me a bit about yourself. Like, who are you outside of the effects business?
Well, first off, let me just say I really appreciate the opportunity of getting to do this and chat with you. And everything, it's super cool. As far as me, like outside of the film industry and stuff, I'm just a big lover of all things sort of pop culture, sci-fi, goth stuff, all of it. Monsters, movies, the whole gambit, punk rock. Spent a lot of time, my personal time, working on personal pieces, making latex masks, things like that. And then just enjoying what's out there content wise and things like that, so nothing too crazy.
Nice. Like, anything in particular that you like to focus on for like the latex masks?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times what I like to do when it comes to which is different, I think, than some people, is I like to do more character driven stuff. So like every time I make a new mask, it's more or less in my head, at least, there's a fully fleshed out story, character, and things like that. So I use mask making a lot to practice for my day job being a special effects makeup artist. So I like to have that character driven stuff there to really help develop a fully fleshed out looking piece. And then I try to do everything like to the nines, really pour as much detail and things like that into it, costuming, hair work, all of the little intricacies of painting and sculpting and things like that, to try and make it feel as real as possible, because ultimately that's what we're doing in the film industry, is just trying to push reality and make it, but also make it feel like it could really exist. And so when it comes to my latex stuff, or at least my mask work in general, that's usually what I try and strive for. And then ultimately, like I said, that kind of cross pollinates into the pro stuff. So
Nice, nice. That's pretty cool. And like, have you done like, are you more into like creatures, stuff like that? Because I know a lot of people like to do like, like zombies, like Night of the Living Dead type masks, especially.
yeah, no, I lean more. Lately it's been a little more human based, because where I work now is more like a lot more human based stuff.
Hmm.
But it's still human based with like a twist, like more like a whimsical angle to it, or like heavily aged or things like that, or just weird deformities, things of that nature. But a lot of the times, I mean, I kind of try and be pretty broad with it though, because I want to be well rounded. I might do like something more creaturey, and then from there do something more human based or whatever, and then go back and forth, so I'm not getting too stale on one thing or the other. And I try and keep it really small batch, really tight, so that and high quality, so that they're more collectible that way. And I just more fulfillment for me personally.
Nice, that's pretty awesome. And how long have you been in the
Thanks.
industry?
Well, professionally, probably just under 10 years. I started out in California when I was 19. So from there to now, I'm 29 now. So it's going on probably my 10th year, give or take. Uh,
Oh, nice, nice. We're not that far in age. I'm 28.
no, nice, nice,
That's so
sweet.
cool to
Yeah,
see.
it's the next
Like,
generation.
it's crazy seeing like someone basically around my age doing this stuff. Because to me, I always have that
Yeah.
image of like, oh, it's like, the pros, the guys who are there for like 30, 40 years.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, trust me. It's daunting when you see those guys too in person, or you work with them, because you're like, man, these people have so much. They've seen so much, they've done so much, but it's really cool having that opportunity to be around that stuff. And then also, like, see the new generation come into the fold and stuff. Where I work now currently, we're all around the same age. It's a real small shop in
Hmm.
New Jersey. And so, it's really nice just having that kind of young energy. Not that, again, it's not to, poo-poo any of those old guys. That's, that and what they've done is incredible. And we're always just trying to chase that, it seems like. So
Nice, nice. And like, what inspired you to pursue a career in like the special effects industry? Like, what made you decide like this is it for me?
it's so growing up as a kid, I had always had an affinity for Halloween and things like that. Obviously, my mother was an art teacher, high school art teacher, and my father, he always claims he gave me the nerd gene. So he exposed me to all, like, Jurassic Park, Terminator, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. So it kind of just came all together, and my obsession around Halloween and making characters and trying to transform myself and like be something different. I think that's what really spurred it on, but for the longest time, I didn't know that it was actually a job that people made monsters. I just thought that they kind of existed. And so someone, when I was real little, suggested that to me. I think I must have been like 10 or 11. And I was saying how, oh, the only way to make money as an artist, I thought back then, was to be an architect. And they're like, well, I always saw you making monsters. And I was like, oh, crap, I didn't know that was a job. I'm going to do that. So then I just had this like singular focus from then on. When I was in high school, I had like, I'd gotten like how to make foam latex prosthetic kits for monster makers, things like that, self-taught. And then eventually went to the Savini school.
Wow.
And then ultimately that's what branched me off into the industry at large.
Wow, that's amazing. Nice. And
Thanks.
honestly, incredibly inspirational that you found your thing and you just went for it. And yeah, it's
Thanks.
awesome.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate, really lucky to have the support group with my family starting, and then obviously a lot of friends and everything, and stuff like that. Couldn't have done it alone. So but I appreciate that. Thanks.
Nice, nice. And so now the question, how did you end up
Yeah.
working on Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom?
All right. So when I first gotten out into California, like I said, when I was 19, I had started the first shop I had ever worked for was ADI. I got really fortunate to get an internship there back in 2015. And so I had done some work there for a while, then eventually kind of went back and forth between a few projects and a few shops and stuff, and ultimately landed back at ADI right as Jurassic World was coming through, sort of. I
Hmm.
think at the time, and unfortunately, it's been a while, so my memory's not totally clear, but I'll do my best. And but essentially, where I remember we were working on a bunch of stuff, some James Wan projects and things like that, and then we had the meeting about Jurassic World, and that just kind of blew my mind because I had known for the first one that there was a lot of CG. They had only done like a couple insert dinosaurs, and then for this one, they wanted to lean a little more practically.
Hmm.
And so once we kind of had like the brief on it, I was like, all right, this is awesome. I mean, again, growing up a huge Jurassic Park fan, I mean, that's incredibly formative to me. It's one of the greatest, especially effects driven things ever put to screen. Essentially, like any other job though at a shop, you just kind of get what's given to you. Different projects roll in, but when that came around, it was pretty awesome because we knew we weren't going to be making animatronics, things like that, but still to be able to make a life-size dinosaur at all is just something as a once in a lifetime thing. I mean, and it's probably, aside from another project I can't really talk about, it's still to this day one of the most rewarding projects I've ever worked on. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we came into it, but I can get more into how we built everything and stuff, later on.
Oh yeah, I'm excited about that. And like, what was the working conditions, if I guess that's the best word for it? Like,
Yeah, no.
was it different between working under Universal or for Jurassic than another production, or?
Not that I can remember exactly. There was definitely a little bit more scrutiny. And like basically what had to happen too, which was interesting, is ADI at the time was in a 30,000 square foot warehouse. And so we had to actually like reconstruct the whole shop and whatever to make it fit for all of these things. And once we had started and stuff, I do remember occasionally, like I can't remember what their position was exactly on the production, but someone higher, one of the higher ups, was coming through periodically to like check and see where progress is being made, confirm certain things with like the maquette versus the scale of what we were doing, and just sort of somewhat show and telly stuff like that, just so that they could see the things moving along. And then also keep in mind too, this project was also done incredibly fast. This is one of
Mhm.
the quickest turnaround things I've been a part of. As far, especially with that scale, it was, I think we had a month to a month and a half to do, build three dead dinosaurs, one being 60 feet long. and stuff. So I mean, we really just hit the ground running. It was probably more 2 months from start to finish as far as getting assets and stuff go. But I do remember, I mean, about a month and a half, we just rapid fired that thing out.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
And you mentioned like you guys worked on three creatures. What were the kind of processes behind conceptualizing it and then kind of
sure.
realizing it?
Yeah. And so from what I remember, and so like with the other two creatures besides the Stegosaurus, which was the big one, we had two other ones that were just sort of just really heavily decayed dinosaurs. I can't
Hmm.
remember specifically what species or anything that they were, um, but they were just supposed to be like really, really decayed, like almost just bones and skin essentially. And so with those ones, there was a little, I think, more free range. It was a lot. Everything for this was done almost directly fabricated, meaning that there's not a lot of mold work and stuff involved.
Hmm.
So it's just kind of building it up, and whatever it is, it becomes. And so there was like several teams. I was part of the Stegosaurus team, but a lot of, there was some smaller groups that were oriented and focused just solely on producing these two other smaller dinosaurs. And conceptually, like I said, I feel like that, from what I remember, was pretty loose. But the large scale one had definitely a lot of conceptualization going on. From my understanding, I'm pretty sure we received an asset from production, like a
Hmm.
digital scale model of the Stegosaurus, and that's what we just basically that was what we committed ourselves to producing, and not varying so much at all as to anything away from that other than like color and things. But we had gotten that digital model, and then that was printed at scale, very small, probably, I'm holding my hands up here, it's like maybe like a foot and a half or so, I don't know. But that was just to give us sort of something 3D that we could look at, because obviously the big thing was going to be like 60 feet long, almost 20 some feet high, with the spikes in and stuff,
Hmm.
or the plates. And so from there, we used that digital model then in the computer to figure out how we were going to slice this thing up for sculpting and building it up, and then also then to how to it would eventually break down to all fit in shipping, the large like shipping crates that you see on like freighters and stuff like the ships like that. And that's ultimately where it was going to go from Los Angeles to Hawaii
Hmm.
for the shoot. So we had to use that concept really religiously or follow it really religiously to get it from point A to point B and make sure it all worked and everything like that. But
Okay.
I don't believe, did a lot of in-house conceptualization, but I could be wrong on that. Somebody else who was more involved in that department could probably, correct me or clarify.
All right, good to know. And like, so basically, you guys started with the 3D printed model, and then
hmm
afterwards, you guys basically like free sculpted it, or.
Yeah, so essentially what happened was, and it was pretty wild. Like I said, this is a huge warehouse and stuff. And one day we just got a shipment of these giant styrofoam blocks. I mean, like just the same white styrofoam that you get like when you open up a lot of like packages and stuff like that. Um, and they were massive. I want to say they were probably almost 7 feet tall, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide, and a ton of them. And basically, Adam Doherty, or otherwise known as the Creature Kid on Instagram, spelled
Mhm.
with a K, he was really heavily in charge of the Stegosaurus build, as far, especially from the beginning, where he was the one breaking down the model that we received from production into the different cross sections. And so, how it came about was we would take these giant blocks, we would orient them in certain ways to basically build a slab, or like a wall, and he and I would go in, he'd show, how the outlines of the cross sections, and we would old school style project that with a giant, just like a projector, onto the block, get it scaled based on how it needed to be, using like certain markers and things like that. And we trace that outline of the cross section against the blocks on either face.
Mhm.
And then once that was done, he and I would go and take what's called a hot wire, and it's essentially just an electricated wire, or a wire that's got a charge going through that builds up heat. And I'm holding one big dowel thing or rod. He's holding another dowel rod, and he would trace his side while I'd slowly trace mine, and then eventually we'd come together and the blocks would fall away, and you'd have this general shape of what would ironically the block out. I mean, no pun intended, but the of what would eventually get all shoved together to be sculpted, and that would just give you the broad shape. And that's mostly where I was involved in the very beginning. I had to leave to go on a trip, but I helped him pre-cut all that. And if you go on ADI's YouTube channel, they do have videos of us doing that, and you can see that process of us kind of cutting those blocks out and things. And then when I had gotten back, essentially they'd taken all those big pre-cut slices that we made of the rough shape, stuck them all together, and then a team of Adam and a few other people, John Miller, Sarah Villarreal, and a few others, all got in and started using just rasps and files and things like that. And yeah, essentially kind of free sculpted it using that 3D printed maquette then very heavily to get all of the like the secondary forms and things like that to make it feel more fleshy and real and not just this general shape. And then the head itself was actually sculpted in clay, I believe around a large cut of styrofoam by Wayne Anderson, who sculpted it in breakneck time, and his beautiful head sculpture of this decaying Stegosaurus. That was one of the few parts of it that were actually molded and then cast, because to sculpt that level of detail in styrofoam and fabricate all that would have just been too much, and it wouldn't have lent to the same result. So that's kind of how generally it took shape. And then from there, we kind of glued all that together, making sure that where we were going to eventually cross slice it for shipping was not fused. And then from what I can remember, that foam, once it was done being sculpted, was sealed. And then we would glue giant sheets of foam latex scale skins across the whole body. And then that ultimately, you'd get little wrinkles and ripples and stuff, and that would kind of just play into the more fleshiness of it. And that was cool too, because like the guys who were working on the other dead dinosaurs had sculpted those skin swatches for those. And then, but we were able to use those for this. And then what was also cool was the underside of it, where it's a little more fleshy, a little smaller scales, more ripply sort of flesh. That was actually run from the original molds used to make the graboids for Tremors, the first Tremors movie. That was ADI's like first movie. So we had broken out the graboid molds, and we were using, and it was cool because it was right next to the actual graboid on the wall, and we're just using those to bring out this, eventually create this fully fleshed out thing that was just all built out of styrofoam blocks on the inside.
That is crazy cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. It's like building a big puzzle.
Honestly, yeah, and it's like, and the picture, so to speak, is like in your mind, more or less, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And you're just kind of again following that general reference, and what we were making essentially is what's known as a set piece. So it's not
Hmm.
like a hero animatronic or something like that where you're gonna get a lot of tights or any like tight shots of it. It's more or less just gonna live in the background for scale, for maybe the actors do interact with it and stuff, but it's not the focal point. So that's where you can kind of get away with some of like the loosest things of being like, well, we can just use a graboid skin, or yeah, we can use the same swath of scales and we just flip them and turn them and stuff, and you would never know that it wasn't just one contiguous sculpture, that
Hmm.
it was actually all just pieced together, you know um, on the fly essentially.
Okay, nice, nice. And like,
Yeah.
speaking of the Stegosaurus, because this has been a major source of debate and mystery for the fandom, but why was it so large? Because in the film we see another Stegosaurus that
Yeah.
looks smaller, but this one is much larger, and people have come up with
Yeah.
theories left and right. So you're here to set the record straight, hopefully.
Oh boy. Well, as far as I can remember, because this was something we had brought up a lot too, because we couldn't fathom it either. Or like, why are they telling? Or like, because at first, like, I think we were all kind of thinking, like, are the measurements right? Like, is this really as big as they want it? Like, especially once it was all like said and done, the tail and everything, and then, you put those big plates in, and that's a whole story in and of itself, trying to insert those freaking plates on the back of the head, like 16 feet in the air, but or not the back of the head, but across the body. As for the scale of it, from what I gathered, that's just what production wanted. Like they just wanted it to be massive. They wanted it to feel massive. They wanted it to be, you know, in the shot, like really, just take over. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's obviously not realistic to the real scale of the dinosaur in fossil record, or what you see on screen, in previous Jurassic movies. So as far as my understanding, yeah, it's basically production just wanted it that way, and we just made it that way. We didn't have a say in that, but it definitely made things a little more challenging, but ultimately kind of cool in the end too.
Definitely, like in all honesty, you guys really captured everyone's like imagination with it. Like the
Oh,
amount of
that's cool.
theories people were having, where it's like, oh, it's a genetic anomaly, and like all kinds of
Yeah,
other
right.
stuff.
Yeah, and I think part of it was maybe again I can't remember if maybe there was different changes, and I only ever saw the movie the one time.
Hmm.
But I'm trying. May there might have been an angle where they were just trying to really push like whatever killed this thing is the like is mean. Like this is I mean if it took down this thing, you got to be look out. So I think some of it was for that. If I had to guess, but a lot of it I think it's just either production was like we don't really know nor care how big this thing is. Just make it this big, or yeah, that's my theory too. Because I'm with you, man. I'd be curious as to what they were thinking when they commissioned us to make it that big in the first place.
Nice, nice. And what were some of the design inspirations for the corpse itself? Like, what was kind of the story you were aiming to tell with it?
I think more so than anything, it's like ultimately it was not supposed to be totally decomposed like the other ones where it's like almost unrecognizable. Obviously, I think it's supposed to be a slightly fresher kill. So like, and a lot of it too was like you see that one section of it where it's missing. It's got the ribs exposed and things like that. And a big thing that we were kind of trying to stay away from was making it too gory and gruesome,
Hmm.
because ultimately it probably obviously would be. But I think because of the nature of the movie, things like that, they figured younger audiences are going to probably go see this. They they wanted us to refrain from doing a lot more of that stuff. So that's where you see a lot more of the decay and just like the eyes and things like that. And we tried to paint the exterior of it with a little more dusty look, a little more like worn, not fresh. It's just kind of drying out, starting
Hmm.
to fall apart. And that's more so what we lean towards. And then with the intention too of, and you can see where parts of it are like kind of in the earth coming out, like as it fell, it probably made a big impact. And then we're gonna when it was set dressed, it would have stuff thrown on it and things like that. And then ultimately, like with the spines and stuff, what you see from the ADI photos and things like that, the spines are obviously, or the plates are upright. When they actually set dressed it in Hawaii, I guess someone made the ultimate decision to actually have those all not like that. So they're like flopped off, almost like lopped, like it was falling this plates broke and stuff like that. So I think that was some initial or more stuff that they had decided to add on later. But
Okay.
hopefully that answers your question.
No, it really does. It was very amazing insight into it. I definitely learned something there. This is more of a personal question for me, but
Sure.
the dino damage on the Stego is eerily
Yeah.
similar to the original Kenner toy of the Stegosaurus. Was that on purpose?
Right. I don't know, honestly, again, because like a lot of this was outside of our hands. A lot like with this, it's one of those things. It's like I've worked on some of like Star Wars stuff, like the Mandalorian and things like that,
Hmm.
and it's very felt very similar to like that, where it's like production gives you this, and that's what they want. Like they don't, they're not. And I have a feeling I wouldn't be surprised if part of the initial thing was maybe they had that toy or were thinking of that toy, or somebody was when they made it, or maybe that's what they used to make the initial sort of like, for the reference, you know what I mean? Like had that toy, planted it in a certain way, and was like, all right, well, let's just kind of use this as our reference and we'll model it. Cause I know what you're talking about. I think I used to have that toy and it does look very similar. So it could have been definitely some bleed over, subliminal sort of unconscious referencing that way or something like that. But as far as my understanding is, it wasn't intentional, but you never know. Sometimes they do throw things in like that.
Mm, right, right. And so you mentioned I was split up for transportation to Hawaii. How long
Yeah.
did it take to basically take it apart, bring it over, then set it up for the scene?
Okay. As far as taking it apart was, I mean, what was cool about it was once we had those skins on all there, you couldn't see the seam lines. And
Mm,
so eventually what we had to do was kind of find underneath the skins where that was. And then we just took like a box cutter because they weren't fused and we just cut through this thin foam latex skin. And then that's well then ultimately pushed it all apart. And then I'd go in and mark each piece so that with like a colored dot. So you knew like yellow matches with yellow, red matches with red, green matches with green. You knew where everything was going to line up. And then essentially, I want to say that honestly, the teardown of that thing was fast. It was maybe a day,
Mm-hmm.
at in the shop, just getting it all pieced apart. And then we had a pretty large crew of people just packing it. Like we'd have guys like putting pieces on, elevating them, wrapping them in plastic wrap and giant sheets of plastic wrap, inserting them into every crate when they'd pull into the bay. We just load up another crate, send it out. Probably, I mean, like I said, we built the thing in like month and a half or so. And so I think it took like a day or two to get it out of the shop, which is pretty remarkable. And then I want to say transit wise, it may have been like a week or two. I was
Mm-hmm.
almost supposed to go to set for that to go to Hawaii to help assemble it, but ultimately at the last minute they opted not to send me, and they sent somebody else alongside with Adam to send it up, set it up, because again, Adam was really the one who was heavily involved in splitting this whole thing apart, bringing this all together. And so when they got it there, I mean, it was crazy. He was sending me pictures. Like at some point during the transit, there was giant spiders under the skin. He's like saying like how they lifted the skin up and you see a spider as big as your hand run out through it. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad I'm out, not there. And he says like, sweating in the jungle of Hawaii, getting bit up by mosquitoes, all this stuff. I'm like, oh, this is glamorous. This is really making me want to. It's making me miss out. Now, like, I want to say they assembled it pretty fast, and then, like I said, and ultimately, what made it even faster. I mean, they probably got it set up in like a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
We had sent some blender pieces, which are just unattached pieces of skin, so that they could use that to hide the seam lines and stuff. And then ultimately, I think what helped them probably set it up is them deciding not to use the spines or the plates. I keep calling them spines, but the plates upright, because doing that it would require like at least a forklift or some sort of crane. Like
Mm-hmm.
when we were doing it at the shop, we were at a forklift with a pallet on it. I'm strapped to that with another guy, and we're like basically suspended 15 feet in the air trying to insert this like 5 foot fiberglass thing into these pipes while two guys are laying on top of it trying to orient it up. So I think ultimately, as much as it doesn't really make sense, like they decided to just let those flop over. So it probably saved them a lot of headache and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time on that end. But yeah, it was. I want to say it was pretty rapid, and then the shoot, what I don't think was very long either. They might have been there for like a week or so, and then ultimately, I have no idea what happened to it. I mean, they may have left it there. Production may have taken it down at some point and thrown it away. I mean, it wasn't designed to be archival, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe some split apart. Maybe someone kept the head. I have no idea on that end. But
Very
yeah, it's I'm
interesting.
pretty. Yeah.
And do you know what the scene it was supposed to be in? Like any idea of like what they were shooting specifically?
I want to say it had something to do early on, because obviously that movie doesn't, they're only on the island for the first part from what I
Mm-hmm.
remember. So I think it was supposed to be early on, kind of, again, my memory's foggy as far as what the movie, as I remember like the auction stuff and everything like that. I want to say it's before all that when they're building, they're just kind of finding these dead dinosaurs and wondering what killed them essentially. And I do know the only thing I think that you ultimately do see it that gives it a little bit of context is like a calendar came out, like as a merchandise piece or something that you could buy. And there's one scene or there's a shot, like a still shot of it out of focus in the background, and like Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt are like standing there, like talking or like in shock or looking off
Mm-hmm.
at something. So ultimately, I think that's only from that context, that's the only thing I can think of as them kind of just finding, from my understanding and what I remember, it was just they're supposed to be finding these dead dinosaurs and they don't know what's killing them. And then it turns out it's this hybrid thing that they built, and that they're trying to auction off as a weapon or whatever.
And you mentioned like earlier, just like it's not like it wasn't meant to be an archival piece. What's the difference between an archival piece versus a
Well, like
regular?
an archival piece being like, like a animatronic or something like that is something you're not going to just probably take and throw away. Like a lot of times set pieces are just kind of dismantled and either recycled or trashed.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with something like, like an animatronic T-Rex, that's something archival might not be necessarily the right word, because literally everything we do is non-archival. The skins rot, everything, silicone and latex, foam latex do not hold up over time. But it's more or less something, what I meant was like something you probably keep. Like I know they kept like a lot of the stuff from the first Jurassic Park and that stuff until, certain things happened with the, rights and who owned what and things like that. Um, but but for this, it was like I said, like a set piece is just kind of like, all right, we used it. I don't know what the heck we're gonna do with a 60-foot Stegosaurus. Where the heck are you gonna store this thing? So I think ultimately they just were like, well, we'll build it and then it'll become a giant pile of garbage. Unfortunately.
Yeah, this is so unfortunate because, I wouldn't mind
Yeah.
having a giant stego in my backyard.
Yeah, right. I think yeah. I at least like the head or like one of those plates or something. That's
Oh yeah,
definitely would be cool.
that'd be cool. Like especially for your room, like you'd have like the plates just like leaning against the wall.
Oh yeah, it'd be awesome. It'd be awesome. I mean, it'd be a reminder every day to count my blessings and thank God I didn't fall off that forklift.
When did you guys ultimately find out it was cut from the film? Was this during the production or when you guys actually saw it?
No, and that's why I've only ever watched this movie one time, is because I went and saw it in theaters. I
Hmm.
brought my family, everybody. We were all so excited and stuff. And again, like most of my career has been, and it's just the way things are now. It's sequels, reboots, or remakes.
Hmm.
And so it's like, I didn't get a chance. I obviously was not born early enough to work on the original Jurassic Park or 1 through 3. And so this is the closest shot I was ever going to get. So I was like really excited and again, really proud. I mean, the whole team was really proud of this thing we did so fast and stuff like that. And so, we went to go see it in theaters and I'm just sitting there the whole time. I'm like, oh, okay, okay, it's going to be in this scene. Oh, I bet it's going to be here. Just looking for it the whole time. And then eventually they're off the island and I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm like, I don't think this thing's gonna be in this movie. I don't think they used it. And then we go through the whole movie, and by the end, I'm like, yeah, sure enough, they didn't use it. And that was, I was younger then and more inexperienced, and that was the first time I had ever worked on something where it didn't make it to screen at all,
Hmm.
like not even just for a second. And so for me, that was just really disheartening and devastating in a sense of where it's like, again, it's just something we're super proud of, and it's not anything insane. It's not an animatronic T Rex. I know Neil Scanlon had built these incredible animatronic dinosaurs for certain scenes in that, but it's still cool to be a part of that universe and to just not have that. A lot of the times for people like us, effects guys and things, the payoff comes in what you get to see on screen. You don't usually, at least for someone like me who doesn't work on set primarily, you don't get to see a lot of how that thing is utilized in its actual setting until it's in front of you on screen. And so to not have that payoff, I think ultimately was the big thing that really kind of drove me nuts and was ultimately why I was sort of upset.
Hmm.
But it was a great learning experience for that reason, and ultimately I've come back around on it, just being like, at the end of the day, as much as it sucks to not get that payoff and see that thing on screen and see all of our hard work, our collective effort, you can't take away the memories of building that, the stuff I'm telling you and the things that, like, and getting this opportunity is sort of almost that level of closure where it's like, I didn't get that, but it's nice to see that other people are curious about it and want to know about it and see it. And because it was cool. And it's not every day you get to sit on top of a giant dead stegosaurus going into work for 8 hours a day and then ride down its head like Fred Flintstone and stuff. It's surreal. I mean, it's like stuff like that I'll take to the grave. And even though it's not on screen, it doesn't mean it's not in here. So that's, unfortunately, that's usually how it goes. Sometimes you'll get a pre-advanced thing. They'll be like, okay, we're scrapping this, they're going in a different direction. But for this, it was like, no, they just didn't use it. I think they used maybe one of the other decaying dinosaurs. I think you see it in like a blink and you miss it moment when like a Jeep's rolling up a hill or something. It's off in a
Yeah.
corner. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The one with like the blue tongue or something that's like just
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's that. Yeah. I remember something blue about it, so that's probably what it was.
And well, like, it's unfortunate, but hopefully like one day the like a deleted scene's gonna pop out. And if ever that
Yeah.
doesn't happen, you guys really like I know I said it before and I cannot understate it. You guys really captured everyone's imaginations with it. And as
No, that's
someone
cool.
who
And
loves Stegosaurus, like I loved it.
No, that's awesome, and that's like I said, and that's great to hear, and it's insane how all these years later, it's like, finally, like I get some payoff from this thing, other than just telling people about it and stuff. So it's people like you that keep people like me doing what we love. So I appreciate that.
And honestly, thank you and like thank like FX people for the work they do because
No,
they're
thanks.
inspirational in their own right. Like even for myself, I've recently really been becoming more and more inspired by FX people of like people behind the camera, so to speak, for a lot of
For sure.
films, like the real unsung heroes. And like I think it's amazing stuff you guys do, like miracle work.
Oh wow, well, I appreciate that, and trust me, if you saw the sausage was cut, it was made, you probably would think the opposite. But I appreciate that, and it's cool, and and it's a great way. I feel really lucky a lot of the times because I had that dream, and I've been able to accomplish it, and just really be a part of a lot of things that really shaped me as a person. So to have that ability to give back to others is it's cool, and thank you, really appreciate that.
No problem. And like thank you for your time on this, honestly. And
Of
I just got
course,
a couple more questions, and and
yeah.
it'll be all done. So, what are your hopes for your next film projects? Like, do you have any franchise or genre in particular that you'd really love to tackle?
Yeah, then that's a great question because, like I said, I've been really fortunate, honestly, to where I've been able to check off a lot of my major bucket list stuff, especially this early on in my career. Like I said, I'd spent a long time out in California and bouncing around, mostly between ADI and Legacy Effects,
Hmm.
where basically finished up my stint out in LA at Legacy. And I've gotten to work on Predator movies, Star Wars. Jurassic, things like that, Marvel, DC, that whole gambit. And so for me, really, I really wanted a chance to work on an alien movie. I did get a chance to work on Neil Blomkamp's Unseen alien movie. That was
Whoa.
one of the first things that I was on when I was at ADI. Was when they were doing the concept stuff. I was mostly from afar, but I did some lab work on a few of the pieces and things, and that was a really exciting time. And so technically, I like to say I worked on an alien project, but then obviously Romulus came out, and that was right after I left Legacy, and so like a lot of my friends worked on that, and I'm really proud of them, and I'm glad they got nominated for the Oscar and everything. But that
Hmm.
would have been one to check off officially, really check off the bucket list. And besides that, honestly, probably Terminator. I would love to work on something Terminator related. But where I work now is really fulfilling in the sense of I've worked on most of my career has been centered around blockbusters
Hmm.
and things like that. And so where I work now is a lot more scaled back, and it's a lot more like A24 type movies and smaller stuff, and a lot more like reality grounded, like again, a lot of human based stuff, like likeness things and wounds and like kind of deformities and mutations and things like that. And it's just been a cool different direction, so I want to continue a little more down that road. And ultimately my big goal that I still would like to achieve is to work on something that ultimately wins an Oscar. I'm not a big awards guy, but that would just be something cool to just say I've gotten to work on some Emmy stuff and things like that. But it'd be cool to check that one off too, and just work on more monster stuff, werewolves, vampires, things like that.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. And look, honestly, with the
Yeah.
work you're producing, like I think it's just a matter of time more than anything for that
I
Oscar.
appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And to wrap up, is there any projects you'd like to plug, like personal, professional, anything you'd like to just
Uh,
throw out into the ether?
I mean, not really. I mean, if people want to follow me on Instagram, that's primarily where I'm posting a lot of my stuff, personal work wise and professional work wise. And if people ever want to reach out or anything, obviously DM me like you did. But you can follow me at Reed Cesare. There's an underscore in between my name there. Um, and other than that, nothing too much really. I've got some things in the works, but nothing that I, can really share right now, unfortunately. But no, yeah. So give me a follow there. Reach out, find me on Facebook. Search my name, you'll find me. You can find my website too. It's not updated, but go to the Instagram for that.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you for your time. It's incredibly
Of course.
appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the opportunity and everything. It's really cool, and I love doing stuff like this. So anytime.
Awesome, awesome. All right.
Sweet. Great chatting with you.
Yeah. And I guess that's it.
All right.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the interview. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Jurassic Time here on YouTube. If you want to follow Jurassic Time or Jurassic Library, check us out on social media, Jurassic Memoir for Jurassic Time and Jurassic Library for ourselves. Thank you and have a great day.